Buying a tennis racket can be a pretty exciting experience, but it can also be pretty daunting if you're not really sure what you're doing. And it will certainly hurt your game in the long run if you do purchase the wrong racket. So today I'll share 7 mistakes I've learned over the past 15 years for you to avoid when you're purchasing your next racket. Hey guys, this is Guy from My Tennis HQ. And today I wanted to share a little bit with you some mistakes to avoid when you're purchasing a racket. I think we all get very excited when it comes to buying a racket. I actually think, when it's your first racket, you feel like, I'm really going to dive into tennis. I really want to pick a good racket, make sure I'm off to a good start. I think that's really exciting, but I feel like as you keep progressing, you keep getting more and more excited because you know how much a good racket can bring your overall level up. But sometimes I feel like a lot of us get pretty carried away and end up making the wrong decision. And this is something that, when you look back, you know that you didn't purchase the best racket. So there are a few mistakes that are pretty recognizable. Personally, I made a lot of these myself. Sometimes I didn't purchase the best racket, especially when I was younger. I let some factors that shouldn't have influenced my decision influence it, but I've learned a lot over the past 15 years, and I've talked to a lot of our followers, asked for their feedback on the factors that they use to make decisions when purchasing a racket. So I just wanted to share them with you today, and hopefully you will be able to get the right racket for you next time. So just jumping right into it, mistake to avoid number 7 is not assessing your tennis level properly. I find a lot of people, they get excited about the idea of getting more into tennis or just taking their tennis to the next level. They get excited about a new racket coming out by some new player using this racket, and they just go ahead and make the decision of buying it and incorporating that racket into their game. But in reality, I think it's extremely important to assessing your tennis level before buying a racket. Because as a lot of you probably know, a beginner is going to need a very different racket than an advanced player or even an intermediate player. And depending on your game style, you're going to require different rackets. If you're a baseliner, if you choose to serve and volley more frequently. So I think it's really important that you don't just make an impulsive decision, and that you do think before you write down the pros and cons of each racket, and write down where you feel like you can benefit from more power, more control, assessing really your tennis level from a big picture, and from then on you go ahead and make a decision as to what racket to buy. So don't just buy any racket out there just because you saw Roger Federer playing with it, Rafael Nadal. Just go ahead and make sure this is going to be the best racket for your game. Mistake to avoid number 6 is buying a racket that is too heavy. So I've personally made this mistake. A lot of times for guys, this is kind of a pride thing. You want to play with a heavy racket just because, that's what the man's going to do. And because you want to kind of show that you're advanced enough to, play with a heavy racket. But I think this is a beginner mistake, and that should be avoided at all costs, because that could really harm you in the long run. While you shouldn't also just, pick a light racket, because that's going to keep your game up to a ceiling. You should go to a racket that is as heavy as you can stand, but you should not go beyond that. And at the end of the day, one thing to keep in mind of is that if you're in between 2 racket weights, if you choose a racket with a lower weight, you can always add lead tape, which will bring the weight up. If at first it was too light for you, but if you do buy a racket that is too heavy, you cannot do anything to take that weight off. So do not buy a racket that is too heavy for you. There's no shame in playing with a lighter racket. I myself never played with a racket that was extremely heavy, but I did customize it at some points, with the lead tape, whatever. I want to just bring it to the right level. Mistake number 5 is only considering the static weight of the racket. So this is something that some of you may not know. If you are more advanced, if you're really into rackets, this is something you should know. But otherwise, I didn't learn it until, I don't know, I was probably like 14 or 15. But you shouldn't just buy a racket because of its static weight. So there's a difference between the static weight and the swing weight of a racket. The static weight is just going to be, if you put the racket on top of a scale, that's just going to show you, how much the racket weighs itself. But the swing weight is essentially how difficult it is to swing a tennis racket. And that's going to be calculated based on the static weight of the racket and where that weight is in the racket. So the further away the weight is from your hand, the higher the swing weight would be. So if you do purchase a racket with a lower swing weight, it's going to be more maneuverable. You're going to be able to play, change directions and move the racket around a little bit better. But if you do choose a racket with a higher swing weight, you're going to be able to get more power out of it. One way to think about static weight versus swing weight is by using a hammer. So when you think of static weight, it doesn't matter if I hold the hammer here, here, here. If I put it on top of a scale, it's all going to show the same static weight. But in terms of swing weight, let's just say if I hold the hammer here and I swing it, it's going to swing one way. It's going to feel one way to go like this. But if I hold it right here, which most of the weight is on the head of the hammer right here, it's going to be a lot easier to swing it. But if I hold it right here, you're going to get a lot of momentum. And the same is true for the swing weight of a racket. So if most of the weight is on the head, you're going to have a higher swing weight. If most of the weight is further away from the head, you're going to get a lower swing weight, and you're going to get more maneuverability, but you're going to lose power. So that's a good analogy to keep in mind. So when you're buying a tennis racket, it's very, very important that you consider the swing weight, because sometimes two rackets will have the same static weight, but one will have a higher swing weight, and that might or may not be good for you. So this is definitely something that you want to consider, and it's definitely something you should learn if you are more of an intermediate player and you're considering of buying a racket to take you to the next level. Mistake number 4 is not considering the strings. So I get it, the racket is extremely important for your game, but it's worthless if you pick a great racket, an expensive racket, and you go ahead and do not pick the right strings for your game. Understanding the strings can be a little complicated. You have a few different options: gut, synthetic gut, polyester. Each one's going to have benefits and drawbacks as well. Some of them are more expensive, some of them are cheaper. So you need to know the strings that will complement the racket you're buying for. Some rackets will benefit from using gut, some rackets will benefit from using polyester, more flexible, less flexible, thicker strings, thinner strings. It all comes down to essentially what your game needs. But it is extremely important to consider what strings you'll be using with that racket, and it's something you should always keep in mind. Real quick, before I give you the final 3 mistakes to avoid, if you are enjoying this video, if you're getting something out of it, you might as well check out some of our other videos, and make sure you leave a like on this video, subscribe to our channel. We got lots of stuff related to racket buying, tennis tips, some drills that you can find. We have a lot of racket reviews from Karue, who is Naomi Osaka's hitting partner. He's got some great stuff coming out. He's always hitting and trying new rackets. So make sure you subscribe if you do enjoy that. But moving on to mistake number 3. This mistake is huge, and it's more of a beginner mistake, but I see it so frequently, and I personally let this factor influence my decision when I was younger. But do not pick a racket because it looks good or just because one of your favorite players is using it. The reality is that a lot of players, even if they play with a pure strike babblet per se, they do not use that racket in real life. It's just a different racket, completely customized, that they just painted in order to promote that racket because the brand really wants them to do so. And do not pick a racket just because it looks good. I know some of the rackets, you just look at it and they just feel great, and you're like, man, I'm gonna play so good with it. But the reality is that it may or may not fit your game, and you won't know until you try it. So do not let that be the sole influencing factor in your racket buying decision. Number 2 is buying the wrong grip size. So as most of you know, each racket is going to have different grip sizes, and it doesn't matter if you buy the best racket in the world, the best racket out there for your game. If you buy the wrong grip size, that all goes down the drain. And the same principle kind of applies to the buying the racket with a heavier and lighter weight. If you do buy the smaller grip size, you can always compensate by adding a leather grip or just by using multiple grips. It's not going to be the same as buying the right grip size at first, but it's definitely something you can kind of overcompensate. But if you do buy a grip that is too big, you're not going to have the firmness in the grip that you need, and it's definitely going to be good, definitely not going to be good for your game. So make sure you try out different grip sizes. You got to feel comfortable with it. It cannot be too large. Large grips will hurt your serve. You're not going to be able to get that much pop, and smaller grips are just going to, rotate in your hand that much. So make sure you try those out and you make an informed decision as to which grip size to purchase. And finally, the number 1 mistake to avoid is not demoing the racket before you buy it. You cannot just trust what people on YouTube are saying. You cannot just trust online reviews. Do not trust what we say for it. Do not take our word for what a racket is like, what it feels like. Do not read reviews on Tennis Warehouse and make a decision just solely based on that. You will not know if a racket is good for you until you try it. And you cannot only try it once, you should try it for a longer period of time. You should compare it to other rackets. You should add the strings that you usually play with, the strings that you're eventually going to be playing with. You should put a nice grip on it, and that's the only way to know if that racket is going to be great for you. It would be great for us if you just go ahead and buy a bunch of rackets, but it's not going to be great for your game. So make sure you are demoing your racket before you buy it. That way you will for sure know that it's going to be a good racket for you. These were by no means all the mistakes that you should be avoiding when purchasing a tennis racket. This is just kind of a condensed list of mistakes that and patterns that we've noticed with a lot of people, we've noticed with ourselves in the past that we've made. And the more and more we keep understanding about rackets, the more we think that these are mistakes that, whether you're a beginner or you're a more advanced player, you should always keep those in mind. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you enjoy our other videos. Once again, if you do enjoy them, make sure you leave a like on this video. Make sure you subscribe. It really helps us out a lot. And if you are thinking of purchasing a racket, if you've demoed it out, if you're ready to pull the trigger and you want to help us out, just use one of our links to go to Tennis Warehouse. If you do purchase your rackets there, we do get compensated for a little bit at no extra cost to you, and we just get a little bit of affiliate income, and it really helps us out. It helps us get more content to you, helps us keep motivated. So make sure you don't forget that, and I'll see you in the next video.